Welcome to Mission Ready, a professional development series built to strengthen how organizations lead, communicate, and perform. Each session translates real-world leadership lessons into practical tools any team can use, whether you're driving strategy, managing people, or building your career. The focus is simple: clarity, discipline, and consistent execution. This isn't about where you come from. It's about equipping you to operate with confidence in fast-moving environments. Whatever your role, this is your space to refine your craft and get mission ready. Welcome to episode 3 of Mission Ready, the Workforce Economy. Today we shift focus from supply chains and trade policy to the engine that actually performs the mission: people. Every leader knows that talent determines capability, but what most leaders never see is the economic landscape beneath the workforce, the forces that determine whether you can hire, retain, or develop the people you need. Workforce economics isn't just about wages. It's about how labor supply, productivity, skill levels, and inflation combine to create the reality your team operates in. If you understand that landscape, you can anticipate morale issues, hiring challenges, and capability gaps before they appear. In this episode, we're going to look at why wages rise and why sometimes they don't. We'll look at the productivity pay gap, the cost of turnover, and why the talent pipeline in America is strained in ways most people never see. This isn't HR theory. This is practical readiness. When leaders understand workforce economics, they make better decisions, build stronger teams, and create stability that others can rely on. When leaders think about workforce management, the conversation often centers on hiring, how to recruit, how to attract talent, how to fill gaps. But economically, hiring is the most expensive path a leader can take. Every new hire comes with hidden costs: recruiting, onboarding, background checks, HR processing, training time, and a full productivity ramp-up that can take months. Research from the Society for Human Resource Management shows that replacing a single employee costs between 50% and 250% of their annual salary, depending on the role. Retention, on the other hand, is almost always cheaper. When you keep a trained, capable person, you protect institutional knowledge, team cohesion, and performance stability. The most expensive workforce is one that constantly has to be rebuilt. Turnover is not just an HR problem, it's a readiness problem. Every time a leader loses a skilled worker, the capability of the entire system drops. And when turnover spikes, so does burnout, training fatigue, and operational risk. Hiring builds the team, retention preserves the mission. When workers talk about feeling underpaid, they're rarely reacting to their wage number. They're reacting to the relationship between wages and the cost of living. Nominal wages, the number on the paycheck, almost always rise slowly over time. But real wages, what that paycheck can buy, change based on inflation, housing costs, healthcare, transportation, and debt. This is why leaders hear employees say, "I make more than I used to, but I feel poorer." Economically, that statement is often true. From 2021 to 2023, wage growth rose faster than any period since the 1980s. But inflation rose even faster. Real purchasing power dropped. And when real wages fall, morale falls, turnover rises, and financial stress becomes a hidden operational threat. Leaders who understand this dynamic respond the right way, not by throwing wages at the problem, but by improving stability, predictability, and organizational confidence. Pay is not just a number. Pay is a psychological signal of security. And when inflation erodes that signal, even a good team begins to feel strained. This chart shows one of the most important economic realities shaping the American workforce. Productivity is rising steadily, while real compensation is rising much more slowly. In other words, workers are producing more value per hour, but their inflation-adjusted pay is not keeping up at the same pace. Look at the numbers. In 1990, the productivity index was 71 and real compensation was 77. Workers produced less, but their pay, adjusted for inflation, was slightly higher. By 2000, productivity rose to 86, while real compensation increased only to 84. Output climbed, pay barely moved. By 2010, productivity reached 97, but compensation only reached 90. The gap widened. In 2020, productivity jumped to 108, while real compensation rose to 94. Workers became far more productive, yet almost none of the gains showed up in their paychecks. And by 2024, productivity ticked up again to 110, while compensation sat at 96. The gap is now a structural feature of the economy. The line chart reveals the same story visually. The blue line representing productivity climbs sharply, a sign of technological advancement, automation, skilled labor, and improved processes. But the gray compensation line lags behind. To a worker, this gap is felt as, I'm doing more, but I'm not getting ahead. To leaders, this gap matters because it shapes morale, trust, retention, and expectations. Workers sense the disconnect even if they don't use the term productivity pay gap. This isn't about politics, it's about economics. And understanding this divergence helps leaders anticipate workforce stress before it becomes turnover, burnout, or disengagement. The key takeaway? Productivity is outpacing pay, and the workforce feels that difference every single day. Every leader today feels it. Hiring is harder than it used to be. But what most people don't realize is that this is not a short-term problem. The United States is facing a long-term talent gap that will affect every sector of the economy and every team we lead. Across healthcare, logistics, cybersecurity, skilled trades, manufacturing, and education, demand for workers is rising faster than the supply of qualified people. This is not because people are unwilling to work. It's because the demographic and skill pipelines feeding these industries have weakened. The workforce is aging. The birth rate has declined for decades. Millions of boomers are retiring with highly specialized experience that cannot be easily replaced. At the same time, fewer young workers are entering fields like construction, electrical work, machining, and nursing. Then we add the skills mismatch, a growing gap between the skills employers need and the skills job seekers actually have. Roles requiring digital literacy, advanced manufacturing knowledge, or technical certification often sit open for months. In cybersecurity alone, the US has more than 600,000 unfilled positions. The result is a structural talent shortage. And for leaders, this means longer hiring cycles, higher wage pressures, more overtime, more burnout, and more organizational instability. If leaders don't understand the talent gap, they may mistake a labor shortage for a motivation problem. But this isn't about effort, it's about supply and capability. The talent gap is shaping the future of our workforce, and effective leaders prepare for it, not just react to it. Turnover is not just a people problem, it is an economic problem. Every time a trained employee walks out the door, leaders absorb a hidden cost that rarely shows up on a financial statement. Research from SHRM, MIT, and LinkedIn consistently finds that replacing an employee costs between 20% and 200% of their annual salary, depending on skill level and specialization. Why? Because turnover creates a chain reaction. Lost productivity while the position is empty, recruiting and interviewing time, onboarding and early training, errors, slowdowns, and quality loss during ramp-up, overtime for remaining staff, morale damage and disengagement. Now compare that to development. Training a current employee, giving them a skill upgrade, certification, or leadership opportunity typically costs 5% to 15% of salary and comes with immediate productivity gains because that worker already knows your systems. This is why leaders say, You either pay for turnover or you pay for development. One drains capability, the other builds it. For Mission Ready, the principle is simple. When you invest in the people already on your team, you're not just raising skills, you're strengthening readiness. The labor market we operate in today is not the same labor market we led in before 2020. Remote and hybrid work permanently changed talent pools, cost structures, and expectations. But here's the truth. Remote work didn't create chaos. It exposed where organizations lacked clarity, trust, or workflow discipline. From 2019 to 2022, the percentage of workdays performed remotely jumped from under 5% to over 40%. It has settled around 25 to 28%, depending on the sector. That shift reshaped wage competition, because suddenly your competitors weren't just local companies, they were national companies. Hybrid work also split the labor market into two paths: workers who can operate anywhere, or workers who must be physically present. And leaders must understand how each group experiences work differently. The takeaway is simple. Remote and hybrid are not perks, they are tools. Tools that either strengthen an organization by improving retention and widening the talent pool, or weaken it if leadership fails to set standards, communication rhythms, and accountability. Productivity is not just the output of machines or software. It's the output of human beings. Morale, engagement, and clarity of purpose amplify the effectiveness of every hour worked. A disengaged team member doesn't simply produce less, they disrupt workflows, slow communication, and quietly increase turnover risk. Research consistently shows that engaged employees outperform their disengaged peers by wide margins, and they stay longer. For mission-ready leaders, the takeaway is simple. Engagement is not a soft skill, it's a readiness factor. When morale increases, productivity increases. When morale collapses, nothing you do operationally will function the way it should. At this point in the series, we shift from analysis to action, because workforce economics isn't something happening out there. It's something leaders shape every day through the decisions we make inside our organizations. The first lever is pay design. Compensation is more than a number, it's a strategy. Base pay keeps people stable. Variable pay rewards contribution. Recognition systems reinforce culture. Strong leaders align pay with the behavior they want to grow. The second lever is skill pathways. Organizations that fail to train will always pay for turnover. Cross-training builds agility. Certifications increase capability. Leadership development expands your bench. A team that is growing is a team that stays. The third lever is work design. Today's workforce values schedule flexibility, control over their work, and a clear sense of mission. When leaders design work intentionally, engagement rises and burnout falls. These levers put leaders in the driver's seat. You can't control the labor market, but you can control how your organization adapts to it. Mission-ready workforce leadership takeaways. Here are your leadership takeaways from episode 3 of the Mission Ready Workforce series. First, you don't just manage people, you manage a labor market. Every organization competes for talent, whether it realizes it or not. The moment you hire someone, you enter a competitive market for their skills, their time, and their loyalty. Second, wages are not simply generosity. They are shaped by productivity, prices, and the competitive landscape. A raise only matters if it outpaces inflation, because real buying power is determined by what people can afford, not just what's printed on their pay stub. Third, turnover is far more expensive than retention. When skilled talent walks out the door, you lose capability, relationships, and momentum. Retention preserves stability, saves money, and protects performance. Fourth, the talent gap punishes organizations that do not train. Skills are the new supply chain, and the organizations that invest early and often are the organizations that win. Training isn't optional, it is operational readiness. Fifth, calm leaders win labor markets. Reactive leaders panic when shortages hit. Prepared leaders build capability before it breaks. Your steadiness becomes your team's strength. And this leads us to the mission-ready workforce principles: stability, capability, accountability. Strong teams don't appear out of nowhere. They are built through disciplined leadership, consistent investment, and a clear sense of mission. Mission complete. Before we close out this episode of Mission Ready, I want to leave you with a mindset that carries across every domain of leadership. General David Petraeus said, "Leaders build trust through competence, consistency, and care." If you want your team to give their best, show them they can rely on you every single day. That is the heart of workforce leadership. It's not about managing tasks. It's not about reacting to shortages, turnover, or labor pressures. It's about building trust, developing capability, and creating stability so your team can thrive in any environment. Thank you for joining Mission Ready, where we train leaders to build stability, capability, and accountability through economic readiness and disciplined leadership. If you found value in today's episode, continue your training. Listen on Spotify, Mission Ready with Sean Havens. Watch on YouTube, Mission Ready Leadership Series. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and as always, stay mission ready.